Know your audience. I think YJ said this, but know your audience in such a way and your topic that when you show up, you are so emotionally connected to it and comfortable with it that you don't even need slides. You can just talk off the cuff.
Welcome to Think Deeply, Speak Simply, the podcast that explores the art and science of business communication. Sponsored by Prezent, the AI-powered platform transforming the way professionals share ideas and tell their stories. And now, here's your host, Rajat Mishra, CEO of Prezent and passionate advocate for clear and impactful communications.
When we think of the most important factors that make great business storytelling great, empathy jumps to the top of the list. I love Mohsin Hamid's definition of empathy. Empathy is about finding echoes of another person in yourself. It's really about putting yourself in other people's shoes and thinking about what matters to them. Last week, I had the opportunity to hear two incredible speakers share a story about empathy. And I'm really excited to have both of them with us here today. Jamie Wheeler, Senior Vice President, Global Clinical Affairs at Edwards Lifesciences, and YJO, Senior Vice President, Sales and Marketing for Structural Heart at Edwards Lifesciences. Jamie and YJ, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Think Deeply, Speak Simply.
Thank you for having us.
Excited to be here.
Awesome. So YJ and Jamie, I know all the amazing work Edwards and your team does for heart health. It'll be great just for our audience if you could share a little bit about Edwards and your roles in the company.
Sure. Do you want to go first, YJ? Go for it.
Sure. Jamie and I actually, I'll give a little bit of history. We worked together on one of our business units called the transcatheter business. And, one of the things that we always look at is how do we challenge and address unmet needs as an organization. And that was the genesis of what you heard, Raj, last week on how we try to think differently. And I think what I love about your podcast is you couldn't say it more succinctly is how do you think deeply and speak simply to an audience on a very complicated topic. So, but our goal at Edwards is really around structural heart, unmet needs of patients, as I mentioned earlier, and how do we do that? So that's kind of in a nutshell. And Jamie is an amazing leader of clinical affairs, and I think a very non-traditional leader of clinical affairs. So I'm going to turn this over to Jamie to talk a little bit about what she does.
Well, and I think what the two of us do really well together is, and part of the company is we're disruptive, right? And so there's a standard way of attacking medical issues, and then there's a way to be disruptive and to actually make access more fair, equitable for everybody. And that's something that you're going to hear a little bit more about in the story that YJ and I told last week and that we'll try to share a little bit today. But it's how do you actually change the game to make medicine more fair and balanced and accessible to all? And that's this really cool collaboration that we did. And it was really sort of the brain trust of YJ partnering with somebody like me in clinical, right? So I do all of the human subject testing at the study or at the company. And kind of putting that together is what changed how we're attacking this issue as a company.
That's awesome, Jamie. And I must tell you that I've actually never seen such close collaboration between the clinical affairs and the sales and marketing teams in so many life sciences companies. So kudos to you for that, like you said, innovative partnership that you developed. So we're going to talk about empathy today. So YJ, I would love to start with you. What does empathy mean to you? And what is its importance in how you work and communicate at Edwards?
So that's a great question, Raj. Empathy, I think you said it really well at the beginning, is how do you put yourself in the other person's shoes? So, one of the things we always talk about from a communication standpoint is, if your intended audience doesn't understand you, it's not their problem, it's your problem as a communicator, right? And so, when you think about the opportunity to do that, putting yourself in the intended audience shoes is super important. And I think from a sales and marketing standpoint, typically my audience is either the internal team, it's a sales organization, different personality types, and people have a stereotype in their head. But a big part of a marketing standpoint is also, who we serve, so the patients and physicians, and that is a whole plethora of different experiences. I think what I will say is, from a personal standpoint, being an immigrant to the country, you kind of see how your parents adapted to understand English, if that's not their natural or first mother tongue. And so you see, I think for me personally, how they understood information that was given to them. And so a part of that, and everyone can relate, whether you travel, you don't have to be an immigrant per se in the traditional sense, the word that I've said, to help you understand the communication gaps. But when we travel, how you try to communicate, I think just really highlights sometimes the frustration. And so, what I try to do in my work communication then is, how do I take something that's what I'm trying to communicate in a matter of my intended audience, whether it's a younger group, whether it's, my external audience, and say it in a way that they'll understand with the least amount of variability. I know it's easier said than done, but I think when you try to do that, your authenticity and communication comes out. And then I also try to relay it to a little personal story. So you talked about storytelling a little bit. And I think, one of the things I think that Jamie and I, from a personal standpoint, and what I, professionally enjoy with Jamie is I've never met a clinical person that can tell a story quite like Jamie can. So it makes my job really easy when I have someone that's a partner to help me with that and is so good at what she does and communicating to patients around the study and the data that it's great to parlay off of each other. And I know from a personal standpoint, Jamie is very sympathetic to a lot of different underserved populations. And that, I think, just gives her and what I would say us together collectively with our personal experiences make us better professionally.
That's awesome. That's awesome, YJ. And I like how you not only talked about empathy, but in even how you described your partnership with Jamie, there was a lot of empathy and understanding of where she's coming from and the value that she's adding to your partnership. So thank you for that. So let's move to the real life story, Jamie, that I heard both of you talk about. So I was really moved by that story of how you diagnose reasons for heart health issues in low income neighborhoods in California. So maybe you could share what was the problem you're going after, what approach you took, and what really struck me, Jamie, in the story is once you thought more about empathy and what the low income neighborhoods are going through, you really pivoted your approach, right? So we'd just love to hear the story and the pivot.
Sure. So it starts for decades. We've always been trying to recruit all types of people into clinical research studies. That way, when products come out, the evidence is relevant for everybody. And that's always been a huge challenge. What we found at one point pre-COVID, when we were actually looking at who had access to our less invasive technologies, was the recipients of the products didn't actually match the population in the US. And so as we started to dig deeper to find out, was there a difference in the actual prevalence rates of, in our case, aortic stenosis or heart valve disease? Was there a difference in race, ethnicity groups? Or was it something else that was causing this lack of equitable access? What we actually found was something called treatment deserts. And so we started to plot where the hospitals were that had access to our technology. And we found in lower socioeconomic areas that we actually didn't have hospitals who had access to the technology. And we had to dig into why this phenomenon happened. And it was an unfortunate byproduct of how our particular medical devices were approved. There was something called a volume requirement that went with the product itself, this less invasive TAVR heart valve. And it meant that a hospital had to do a certain number of open heart procedures, so very invasive, where we saw open the chest, right? We cracked the chest wall, pull the bones back to access the heart valves. They had to do a certain number of those procedures in order to gain access to our less invasive TAVR technology, which is just a simple 2-inch incision in someone's groin. They have their heart valve replaced. They can go home the next day. That was never intended, but now that we recognized what the issue was, we had to figure out how to go and address this and solve for this problem. And so along this journey, right, remember, we had attempted to run a lot of clinical trials where we included populations, all types of people. Those didn't always work. We were now uncovering these treatment deserts, and we tried to work with the government to figure out different ways to include these communities in the clinical research studies. That didn't work. We took a step back and we said, okay, how else can we actually get into different communities of color and talk to them about heart health? And we said, you know what, let's just make this completely agnostic of the company, of any of our medical products. Let's just go in and actually sit down with anyone in communities that wanted to learn about their heart so we could teach them how the heart works, what questions they can ask their providers. We would give them some basic free diagnostic procedures, didn't hurt at all, right? We gave them an echo, an EKG, we took their blood pressure, and we let them sit and talk to physicians, right? Physicians that looked like them. And what we found along this journey, right, this huddle study, is by meeting participants in their communities, right, by not pushing a product, not pushing a clinical research study, something that they knew nothing about, they actually started to open up and get curious and want to learn about their hearts. And in the process of doing these events, our physicians actually got to connect, as did we, with the participants to hear what their struggles were with just accessing basic healthcare in the US. And one of the biggest things I think that all of us took away, including our physicians, was how people are treated along the journey. And so our participants would show up and they would say, I didn't feel heard by my doctor. I didn't feel validated when I said this medication wasn't working. I felt a certain way. And our doctors initially reacted negatively to that. And about the third, maybe the fourth event, a couple of them pulled me aside and they said, you know what? For the first time today, I recognized my behavior and the participants. I came in and I was so busy and I was just in my own headspace and I just disregarded everything that the patient said and I was very brash. And so even our physician said, I've been forever moved, like forever changed. And so through this particular huddle study, we started to connect with people on a very different level. And it's actually changed the way sort of YJ, myself, all of our teams who participated in the events and the doctors think in terms of how we can change delivery of healthcare and educating people to come along a journey so they're not left on the sidelines.
What an incredible story, Jamie. I'm going to share it with you. Actually, my dad went through an open heart surgery and I had a cardiac procedure myself. So just kind of being company agnostic, going and meeting the patients where they are. And we all think we are walking in the other person's shoes, right? None of us think we are not being empathetic. But I love what you said. The doctors had to hear it 3-4 times to realize that, hey, maybe I think I am, but maybe I'm not being empathetic. And maybe I'm not really hearing. And that really kind of, you were able to cut through the noise and the doctors could understand more empathy here is needed. Amazing, amazing.
Hey there, listeners. Quick question. Tired of spending hours crafting presentations that still don't hit the mark? Well, enter Prezent, the AI-powered communication platform that helps you create stunning, impactful presentations in just minutes. Whether you're a data wizard or a storytelling newbie, Prezent has you covered with ready-to-use templates and personalized suggestions to make you shine. Visit Prezent.ai and start saving time while wowing your audiences. That's Prezent.ai, where your story meets success. Now, back to the show.
And then, so I'll just switch to you. From the huddle study, this ended up being a partnership with the NFL and the L.A. Rams. I would not expect that. I wouldn't put L.A. Rams and, heart devices in kind of the same sentence, right? So can you tell us how you started with the huddle study and moved into that partnership and some of the results from that?
Yeah, no, of course. I think what was interesting is we were just trying to figure out how to reach the audiences in these underserved communities, right? And people go to who they trust. Right. So when your friend recommends something, when you have someone else recommend you something else, that's typically when you move. You won't look at the data, but you'll go validate it by, people that you trust. Well, one of the things that we were looking at, a part of the huddle study, is that we were able to bring in NFL alumni. So people that had retired that are 55 and older as a part of the study. And then we said, you know what, these folks are champions in their communities. They have a network. I mean, what's more American than football, to be quite honest? Yes. Right? I mean, what football players will do, I think everyone tries to emulate them in a lot of the ways. And so, to make a very long story short, someone on my team, ironically enough, in our patient engagement group, had a connection to the L.A. Rams. So I just want to be, pretty specific to the Rams organization. We're like, wow, that's unusual. Make a very long story short, we started off in a conversation about how could we leverage, this relationship to talk about our message, right? So what started off as, sharing the message about heart health in different ways turned into, let's do something together that's aligned with the values that we were trying to do, which is create these replicable events in these communities, but we knew people weren't going to come to talk to Edwards Life Sciences. But hey, who's got connections within the community of Inglewood, different areas around L.A., which is our backyard. And so one of the proposals they said, and it was just coming out of COVID, was we've got our Rams Alumni Association. They're called the Legends. We haven't been able to do anything. They're an older, obviously, group of alumni. We haven't been able to do anything. We'd love to do something with them, and maybe this is a good way to start. So they already had also events in the community where they would have football and everyone would show up for the Rams. And typically a lot of the grandparents would come and be a part with their kids. And so we said, that's kind of our target audience. Let's start there. So these events that were already in the community, we tagged on and said, hey, let's bring awareness about heart health. Let's take a condensed version of the things that we did in the huddle study. Education, being able to have physicians that look like them, talk to them, under the support of the Rams as our trusted partner in the community. Let's just talk about that. And so it is very much grassroots, but what I appreciate is that the Rams organization then said, hey, when we have home games, let's use our media power in the ways that we have throughout the whole stadium, and SoFi, if you've been there, there's an incredible amount of digital screens. They were very generous to give us their screens to talk about the program and to talk about, getting an echo, and being able to go see your doctor. And so that's truly a partnership where we were both up to investing in our community. They were both aligned and empathetic to the audience that they serve in the communities. I think that's a big part of the empathy that comes forward. And they were aligned with how we want to go about it. And we couldn't have asked for a better partner for this first foray into it. And I think that's what's getting the notice. People see the L.A. Rams are like, oh, that's different. And then they're willing to learn and hear what we have to say because it's a trusted partner.
What a beautiful story, YJ. And so many things you said resonated with me. You said we all love the data. We all business people. We love data. But people connect with stories, not just data.
Right.
And so storytelling, like you kind of said, and people also connect with the storytellers. So in this case, it's kind of the Rams, it's the Edwards team. So really, really, a really great example. Let's kind of bring it back to the workplace. This is a great example of using empathy, which drove success. Many folks in the workplace, Jamie and YJ, they almost think that my work personality is different than my home personality. And I have my empathy at home with my family and my friends, but at work, I'm really kind of professional. I need to be in a certain way. So what advice, Jamie, I'll start with you. What advice you would have to professionals to bring in more empathy and how they communicate and interact with people at work?
It's funny the way you just described what people think they should show up or how they think they should show up to work. I was raised that way. I come from a military family. And so my dad was always like, you go to work and you're very professional and you mention nothing about your personal life. And I have learned along the journey that you actually have a much more difficult time connecting with people if you're not your true, authentic self when you show up at work. People actually want to know you. They want to know your vulnerabilities. They want to know what you're going through. They want to know not just your successes, which we talk about and we value as so important at work, but people want to know your failures, right? They want to know what makes you, what's at your core. And so I would say having to break through that and having to actually sit and be comfortable with yourself to show up and be your authentic self actually opens a whole different way of connecting with your peers at work, with other business people, in our case, with our patients, because you connect on an interpersonal level. It's not just showing up this cold individual who's just got to get the milestone done, right? You're actually connecting and you're learning about one another and you're making a difference emotionally, but it's actually bettering everybody's lives.
Yeah, well said, Jamie. It's about the mistakes as well. YJ, what was your suggestion to all the young professionals? Hey, can I be empathetic? Will that be seen as a weakness?
So I'm going to build on what Jamie said. Again, just to put context in my demographic, I'm a Gen X, and also the same thing. Especially as a female, keep your personal part separate. My only addition to what Jamie has said is, the term authenticity is used a lot. Obviously, it's a buzzword. Where I think there's value is if there is a personal story or a personal situation that ties into the current one at work, the connection, I think, becomes stronger because there's relatability. And so, I think it's an art. Sometimes, and again, this is just my opinion. If it's oversharing, but it's not connected to anything, then I think you discount the value of being open and sharing the story. And I think we all know people that do that. Sometimes it's too much, but you don't understand where is this leading to. But I think the appropriateness of sharing the things that are in your personal life and why that matters and how that has shaped the current business situation, or when you were feeling uncertain, this is in your personal life where you felt discounted or weren't seen, and at work, this is how you've addressed it. And now I know that I'm a different person because I can say X, Y, and Z, and I saw that in my personal life. I mean, that's an example of trying to tie a story. I think that's great, and especially the bulk of, I would say now, our workforce is in the millennials, right? And they have a very different expectation and satisfaction with what work means. And I applaud that generation in the sense of the personal and the professional are so intertwined, they don't know a difference.
Yeah.
But I think what it would be helpful is curating your personal story to something that is meaningful at work and how it shapes you. And I think that is what makes it really, really authentic. It's not just a personal story for personal sake. That's fine to do. But in the professional setting, and depending on what the intention of that story is, I think it's more meaningful if you can tie it to the current work situation or work outcome or the challenge that you're facing, so that you get more people in the end understanding what you're trying to say. And you might bring more people along with you to achieve the outcome that you're trying to achieve from a professional standpoint.
Awesome. I love that, YJ. So it's not oversharing, relevant sharing. And like Brené Brown said, like, vulnerability is the birthplace of connection. If you can kind of be vulnerable in the right way and share what's relevant, it creates more connection. So, that's thank you for both of your perspectives. Now it's time to move into the rapid fire round. So just 4 questions. Who wants to go first? Jamie, YJ, who wants to go first? The 4 quick questions.
YJ.
Yeah, I should have jumped in. That's the thing. I should have jumped in. Okay. All right. You got us nervous because we don't know what you're going to ask us.
All right. Therefore, yeah. So, Derek knows this. No one has been asked any questions. You haven't been told these questions. So 4 questions, just whatever comes to mind first. Can be a few lines. YJ, first, what is one word you would use to describe the art of business communication?
Simplicity.
Okay. How is communication changing with AI?
Oh, that's a good one. How is it changing with AI? Okay, you don't want me to overthink it. Expanding and contracting all at the same time. It's kind of like a dichotomy.
Okay, expanding and contracting. What is a common communication myth you wish people would unlearn? A communication myth.
Too much of the introduction of oneself and who you are from a title standpoint versus what is the objective and problem that you're trying to solve with what you're trying to communicate. I think that grabs the intended audience and the overall theme of what business communication should be.
Awesome. Last question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone preparing for a big business presentation, what would that piece of advice be?
Plan and prepare on your key objectives so that you know what you want to say, and then truly let yourself be vulnerable when you know what you want to say, and don't rehearse the words of how you want to roll it out. You know what the key objectives are, but I think if you can let your personality come through, that it will resonate more.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you, YJ. All right, Jamie, we'll move to you. What's one word you would use to describe the art of business communication?
Oh, shoot. This is so bad because YJ went first. You'd think I would have this down. I'm a scientist. Critical.
Critical. How is communication changing with AI?
Honestly, I think we're tapping into all different types of data with AI. And so the way we communicate now is multimodal. It's a hard word to say, but multimodal and very different, right? Very complex.
Yeah, and then tapping the data helps us with that. Great. What's a common communication myth you wish people would unlearn?
I think people tend to use too many words. And so I wish they would learn that less is more.
Less is more. Finally, if you could give one piece of advice to someone preparing for a big business presentation, what would it be?
Know your audience. I think YJ said this, but know your audience in such a way and your topic that when you show up, you are so emotionally connected to it and comfortable with it that you don't even need slides. You can just talk off the cuff.
Oh, that's good. That's well said. That's really good.
Well said. And I think both of you demonstrated that, in the session we had. So thank you so much, YJ and Jamie. I know you both are incredibly busy business leaders. Thank you so much for making the time. Any last piece of advice you have for our listeners before we break? And also, how could they get in touch with you or learn more about you and Edwards? So maybe YJ, I'll start with you.
I think communication is such an amazing tool. It doesn't cost anything. It can elevate people. It can hurt people. It can make, behaviors change. I think it's just such a critical part of all things related to not only business, but personal. So I think invest in that. And as far as like reaching out, I'm on LinkedIn. So if people type in my name on LinkedIn, they'll see that, and happy to have any further conversations with anyone that's interested.
Awesome. Thank you, YJ. Jamie, any final thoughts?
Okay, so also to add, I'm on LinkedIn as well, so please feel free to reach out. And adding to what YJ said about communication and reaching out to other people, I would say don't be afraid to make a mistake. Communication is very nuanced. It's very layered. We come at it from all different levels and perspectives. And if you make a mistake, simply apologize and learn. Stay at the table. Don't step out of it. Don't apologize. Apologize, but don't be afraid to make a mistake.
Love that. Stay at the table.
Good.
So thank you again, YJ and Jamie, for joining us. Next week, we'll meet more incredible guests and continue to explore the question, what makes great storytelling great? Until then, think deeply, speak simply.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Deeply, Speak Simply. This episode was brought to you by Prezent, your secret weapon for brilliant presentations. Visit Prezent.ai to transform how you communicate. Until next time, keep thinking deeply and speaking simply.